We've all seen the movie Poltergeist and the Poltergeist series, right? And it terrified us. But did you know that there is a story that is true, that is very much like the Poltergeist movies? Now, the Black Hole Curse is a very interesting story because you have a whole town that experienced a haunting. A lot of people don't realize, but the Poltergeist is a true story. Now, a lot of the elements in the movie are changed, but this legitimately took place in a place called Black Hope. And it's called the Black Hope Curse. Now, what happened is that there was this subdivision. And there were several families in this subdivision who experienced many strange occurrences. Now, one such family was a couple, an older gentleman and woman who moved into this house in a subdivision in Georgia. And for about a year or so, their house was fine and they had no issues. But then one night, they were sleeping in their room and the lights in their room started flickering, going nuts, and then the light bulbs exploded. And after this event took place, several weird things were happening in their house. Lights turning on and off by themselves, doors closing by themselves. They would sometimes hear what sounded like whispers traveling through the hallways. They would see shadows across the hallways, moving even though there was no light present in the hallway. They would see what looked like shadows moving across the hallway. Well, one night, this older gentleman, he came home from work, and as he opened the front door, he seen this figure standing in the hallway. And it was sort of like in the shape of a human, but it was all black and sort of like a solid black object. And it was floating above the ground. There was no legs, no feet. And he seen this black figure move through the hallway and into his wife's bedroom. So he followed this figure into the bedroom, and all of a sudden the figure moved in front of the bed where his wife was sleeping, and this man ran over and tried to jump on this figure, only to fall right through this figure onto the bed and wake his wife up, where she was like, "What are you doing?" And he told her what had happened. Now, this older couple, they began having their grandkids over, and their grandkids would run out of the playroom saying, "There's a man in there, there's a man in there." And the mother or the older woman would grab the firearm, would grab a firearm and go into the bedroom and search the house, and there was still one in the home. And she thought that maybe it was an intruder. Now, the kids kept saying they were seeing this man. All these strange things kept happening. Well, one day they received a knock at the door, and it was an older gentleman. And he said, "I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but if you ever dig in the backyard, be very careful, because there are bodies buried back there." And the person who owned the home, the older gentleman, he said, "What do you mean there's bodies back there?" And the other guy replied, "Well, this used to be a cemetery at one time. Be careful when you dig." And he thought that was weird, but he thought that guy was just joking around, So several months had passed, and they had decided to actually put in a swimming pool. So they began digging to put in this swimming pool, and about 6 feet down, they discovered 2 coffins. And inside the coffins were two skeletal remains with rings on them. And that's when they discovered that these were the remains of a husband and wife, and that this actually was an African American cemetery that was in the area called Black Hope, and that this subdivision had been built right over this old African American cemetery, and all these homes were atop graves, and basically these graves had been desecrated so that they could build this big subdivision. And all these homeowners that, you know, the older man and women had found out that all these other homeowners were experiencing similar things that were happening, and that they were having weird stuff very similar to what was occurring with them happening at their homes in this subdivision. And so they got together and they filed a lawsuit against the developer of this subdivision, and they put in all their money into trying to fight this case and see if they could get their money back and be able to move out of the subdivision. And they end up losing because the developer basically said that they did not know that there was a cemetery there, and that it wasn't disclosed to them, so they didn't have to disclose the information to the buyers. And all these people basically put all their money into these homes and into the lawsuit, that they either had to leave their home and move in with family members or into an apartment, or they basically had to stay where they were because they had no money to move. They had used all their money. And still to this day, there are homes that are built there, and I don't think they've ever removed the remains. So there is this subdivision that is built atop a African American burial ground, which is pretty interesting that all these people live atop a graveyard. And if you're familiar with Poltergeist, you know, this is the initial story, is that this subdivision was built atop a graveyard, and this is why they have all these weird things happening in the home. And I thought that was very interesting for Halloween, because a lot of people don't know about